when I was reading this text, preparing for this sermon, our brother Antoine came to mind. Some of you got to meet Antoine a few weeks ago. Antoine and Chelsea visited us with their family, a wonderful family, disciples of Christ. And Antoine is an optometrist. He has a practice in town. That means he's a healthcare professional who specializes in the eyes. If you've got any problems with your eyes, I would go to Antoine, and from what I hear, he does a very good job. But the reason that he came to mind when I was reading this text is in Luke 12, we hear the rich man speaking, and it seems like the guy had an eye problem. Listen to this. Then he spoke a parable to him, saying, the ground of the rich man yielded plentiful, and he thought within himself, saying, what shall I do, since I have no room to store my crops? So he said, I will do this. I will pull down my barns and build greater, and there I will store all my crops and my goods. And in verse 19, and I will say to my soul, you have many goods laid up, and for many years take your ease, eat, drink, and be merry. He says I there about 6 times. In the text, he refers to himself about 14 times. I don't know how you can do that so much in so little verse, but the rich man did this. He needed an optometrist because he had an eye problem. The rich man was thinking I when he should have been thinking thy God Almighty. He was thinking I. Now it's important for us to remember in this text, the context here. We could go kind of swerve off course a little. We have to realize that Christ is talking to religious men, to Jews here. But we have to realize the audience whom Christ is addressing. So the rich man in the audience's eyes is a Jew. So he's a religious man, regardless, because he's a part of the nation of Israel. They were never thinking about a rich Gentile here, people like us. They were thinking about someone who was a part of the covenant. Now, of course, we can learn from the text, but we got to keep the text in context to start off with. Now, Jesus here is talking about a rich Jewish landowner. Christ's listeners probably knew men like this. Some of them might have been men like this. Now, Jesus tells them that he's wealthy. And why is he wealthy? Well, the text says this, that the ground yielded plentiful for him. His crops were blessed. Now, this was a promise that was made to Israel in Deuteronomy 28. In verse 4, that the blessing would be upon their fields. So when they're hearing that the fields are being blessed, they're thinking, this is good. This is good. And now the man who has this crop that comes in from the hand of God, well, he's happy about that. Things are going well for him. So he decides that what he's going to do here is he's going to build more barns to store the harvest in there. And it's interesting in the Deuteronomy text in verse 8 that it says, the blessings will be upon your barns. Right? So now we've got our audience hearing. What they're hearing is a success story here. For the Jew, this is the way things were meant to go. Because God's hand of blessing was upon the man. Now his solution here to build more barns with a bigger crop, nothing wrong with that. That actually seems quite wise. He has his long-term plans here with the riches that he's acquired is to invest them, to retire, and to take his ease. Now, he's going to eat, drink, and be merry. That means that he's going to be partying it up. This is where the whole plan just starts to lose its way. And who's going to be the primary benefactor in this? Well, he is. And why does he formulate this plan? It's because life revolves around him. It revolves around the here and the now. And it revolves around the physical pleasures of life. Now, God has his say in the man's life in verse 20. And what does God say to him? You fool. You fool. What does that mean? It means he's an idiot. It means that he's an empty head. It means that the guy does not have anything going on up here when he should. And why is he such a fool? Because God says to him, this night your soul will be required from you. You're going to die is what God says. You're going to give, and you're going to give an account for what you've done. How long did the rich man think he had left when he was making his plans? I think, I don't know what age he was, but it seems like he thought he had a time left on the planet to enjoy this abundance of riches. So I think we might be talking about a man in his prime year. And was he right about the length of time that he had left? No, he got that wrong. And he got it way wrong. How is death going to affect his plans? Well, death has the effect of destroying plans. Do you know death will ruin your vacation if you go on vacation and you just die? That's the end of your vacation. It's all over. Death will affect your career path. Death will affect your IRA or your Roth IRA or whatever you do. It will affect it. It'll put an end to it. Death has that effect. And who's going to bring this death upon him? Well, it's not that he had a farming accident. It's not that he got sick and had cancer. God did it. The Almighty said, your time's up. And his time was up. Now, some people think that's unfair. Unbelievers especially would say that's unfair. And they don't like the idea of that God existing. But that's the only God there is. And he hasn't changed. He hasn't changed at all. We got church people don't like God taking people's lives, snatching the life right out of them. Oh, that was a God of the Old Testament. That was a God who, he was only dealt with Israel that way. Then we go to the New Testament, he finally hasn't changed at all. Heard of Ananias and Sapphira? God snatched the life out of Ananias and Sapphira. You heard of Herod? They all came out and they said they saw Herod dressed in his robes and said, a God, not a man. He's a God. And he lapped it up. He took all that praise, and the angel of the Lord struck him down. He was eaten alive by worms. That's a New Testament God. It's a God we worship. He hasn't changed. See, the rich man forgot whose life he was living. The life belonged to God. He was driving a loaner. You ever rent a car out, a nice one? You're driving it around, you're enjoying it. It's actually clean compared to all your other vehicles. The AC works, the heater works, all windows go up and they go down at the right way. It's like, wow, it's lovely, it's wonderful. But you got to take it back again. Because only a loaner, it's a rental. That's what our lives are. Our lives are on loan from God. And those lives will be returned to him. He'll say, time to take it back. And then there'll be an account given. Text here is interesting. It talks about the man's real issue here. It says he wasn't rich towards God. Really, this towards word here some ancient manuscripts that will translate it in God. I think that's more it's talking about. Because when we hear towards God, we think, well, he didn't give God the slice of the pie. He didn't give God his due. That's not what the issue is here. The issue here is, as a Jew, he wasn't rich in God. Now that could be, I think it's talking about his relationship with God. Paul says, in him we live and move and have our being. But this "in" is that he didn't love the Lord his God with all his heart, soul, mind, and strength, and he didn't love his neighbor as himself. He went through the motions of religion, but he worshipped himself and not God. That's the real problem here with this man. Now, when it comes to accumulating wealth and storing it for self-centered pleasure and filling retirements and accounts and sitting back and eating, drinking, and be merry, how does it fit into the culture that we live in today? It is the culture that we live in today. It really is. You don't need to be on, cable channels to get these advertisements about, store up for when you're old age, you're going to be running along beaches holding hands together with your 95-year-old wife, jumping on jet skis and, on the water and flying. It's amazing what you're going to be able to do if you just buy this gold and invest in it. But it's not the only place in the world where this goes on. In Ireland, it's exactly the same. My brother Neil, my oldest brother, last time I spoke to him, it's been a while, he works for the education department for the government, and he says all I do is sharpen pencils all day. And I think he's telling the truth, because they're government workers. But aside from that, he told me in one conversation I had with him, he told me about a guy he worked with, a colleague. I think his fellow's name was George. And let's call him George. He said, yeah, I've been meeting with George recently. We go out for a few pints, that kind of thing. Neil's not a Christian, as most of you know. We need to pray for him. But he says, yeah, my buddy George, he's getting ready to retire. He's put extra hours in, and he's going to be able to retire early, and he's got his money stocked away in his savings account and shares, and he's going to be going on vacation, and he's talking about that, and he never stops talking about it. And I'm like, okay. I says, well, what about your retirement? And we talked a little about that. So I heard about George. And then a couple of months later, I went home, went out with Neil for a meal. I says, how's your buddy George doing? He says, well, not too good. He says he got cancer 6 months before he was going to retire. I says, okay, how's it look? He says, not good. Later talked to Neil. Says, how'd it go with George? He says he died 6 months before he retired. He's dead. Do you know how much of the retirement he got to enjoy? Nothing. What happened to George? God happened to George. God happened to George. But God said to him, fool, this night your soul will be required of you. Then when will those things which you have been provided? So is he, Jesus says, he lays up treasure for himself and is not rich towards or in God. God hasn't changed. The man does not love the Lord as God with all his heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love his neighbor as himself, ends up in the same situation as Jesus tells in this parable. Now, what can we learn from this? Well, it's time to be guilty for what you have. That's where the preacher usually goes. Well, it's not really time to be guilty. It's time to give more of what you have. Stop squirreling all that stuff away. How can you be so greedy? That's generally where it all goes. Or what are you doing with your wealth? And listen, not any of that is for us as Christians. If you're not a Christian, better learn from George and this guy in the parable, because you're going to go the same way. But that's not what we're to learn from this. This isn't a lesson about the evil of wealth or, investing what God's given you and being wise with what He's blessed you with. Nothing to do with that. But I do think what we can learn from here is, first of all, that our big picture matters. Christ brings us back and He brings the Jews back here in His audience, and then it brings us back to the big picture of life being a gift from God, and everything in life is to be used to the glory of God. My problem is when I lose that big picture, when I forget to stand back and go, it's all Him, it's all His. When I step into this minutiae of belongings or possessions or retirements or whatever, when I'm too focused on that, I start to lose my way. And Christ is painting the big picture here. That to step back and get the big picture. Not that I would fall into life revolving around me, as the rich man did. But that's not you and I, Christian. We're not the rich man. I'm not saying we're not tempted to be the rich man, but we're not. We've made decisions in our lives. We've made decisions to follow Jesus of Nazareth. We've chosen to reject the lie that this life is about possessions and retirements and kicking back and pleasure. We've said no to that. When we went into the waters of baptism, we turned our back on this world and we said yes to Jesus Christ. And it's important for us, as we look at texts like that, to remember that, because that is our big picture. Our big picture is that we've rejected this world. My brother Billy said, that's my youngest brother, he said it bad. I think he said it well. He said, we took everything we had. We took it all. And we went to Vegas and we put it on Christ. We put it all on Jesus. Our whole lives. And in doing that, we won. We won, and we continue to win as we put everything we have on Jesus. It's important for us to keep this big picture of Christ's teaching in mind, but we have to realize that this teaching is not a condemnation of us because we have turned our back on it. We're following Christ, and we're going to continue to follow Christ, and we're not going to buy into the lie that is this world. We are, whatever he means here when he talks about rich towards God, we are rich towards God. I think it's better said we are rich in God. See, the reason we turn our back on the possessions and the lies and the deceptions of materials in this world is because in Jesus Christ, we're already rich. I don't need to become rich. I don't need the foibles of this world. I don't need all the materials. We don't need it because we are kings, a royal priesthood, a holy nation belonging to God. We're kings on this earth. We have the wealth that comes to us through Jesus Christ. Man has nothing to offer us. We've put God first. I want to wrap it up here. We are rich in God, or towards God. And we've been blessed in putting Christ and God first. We've dodged the trap of this world, the seduction that the rich man fell into. We have to beware it's still out there, but we're not going to buy into it because we have already said no. So let's enjoy the material blessings that come to us from God. Everything is given to us for our enjoyment, Peter says. Let's make wise plans for the future. But let's remember that our lives are on loan from Him. We're just driving a rental. And someday He's going to want it back. Let's remember the big picture. Let's remember that I need to put God first and not me. And we say that in our prayers. And we're doing it. Let me say it one more time. We're doing it. Well, I know I'm not doing it that well, and you know you're not doing it that well, but we're doing it. We're putting Him first. So let's continue to do that. Christ in the supper brings us back to the big picture of life. As we take this supper, He in His great wisdom, He gave it to us so that we would step back just for a moment, step back and look at the big picture. The big picture is that life is to be laid down, because He laid His life down for us. And we're doing that. We're not going to switch and listen to the voices of this world, calling us to all kinds of foolishness like the rich man. We're going to continue to lay our lives down in Christ. Because through Him and through His blood sacrificed on the cross that this cup speaks of, and through His life laid down physically on the cross, and this bread speaks to us of that too, we've become rich in Him, and this world is nothing to offer us. Let's bow again.